Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode number 2 of Pilu. Thank you so much for joining us again. We are your hosts, Paleki of Angel Messages by Paleki and Louise Farr of Journeying with Louise Lang Farr, or what was your Facebook, Lou? That's your Instagram.
Your healing journey with Louise Lang
Yeah,
Farr.
your healing journey. Sorry, I mixed them up in my head. But your Instagram, I know we mentioned on last week, and it's changed since then. You set up a different one. So
It's
if they
called
want to find you on Instagram now,
it's Journeying with Louise Lang Farr.
and that's all
Yes,
one
all
word,
together.
all connected, right? Perfect. Okay, lovely. Well, welcome everybody, and thank you again for tuning into episode 2 of Pilu. If you did miss last week's episode, it is on Facebook on my page under Spiritual Medium Paleki, and you can also find us we're on Podbean right now, and I believe they put us onto Google Podcasts already, and that is under P-Lou or P-Lou for the podcast if you just want the audio version. And hopefully in a couple of weeks, we are going to be on all the major podcast platforms. So you'll be able to look it up there and even download it if you want to have our talks on the go. So welcome again, and we are going to jump right in. So as I mentioned last week, Lou and I are going to be discussing different topics each week, but based on what we've either discussed during the week or something that we found interesting during the week, something that we've had come up with our spiritual journey. So this week we do want to discuss the topic, and Lou liked it and I liked it, and it's how that the word God has become a dirty word, even amongst the spiritual community at times, where it can almost have a very limiting belief system with people now, or dogmatic, because more people are now referring to either universe or divine source, which again, Lou and I do as well. We interchange, but there is still a certain limitation that people have around the word God, because they either have a more Christian understanding of it, or their belief of what they've experienced through religious practices or understanding has given them a bit of a fear-based perception of God now. So that is something we want to use, because both Lou and I still actively pray, and we both do actively use the word God. So I'm going to bump this one over to you, Lou. So when I brought that topic up for you, you mentioned right away how it did sort of, that resonated with you right away, because you already were like, oh yeah, I know what you're talking about. I thought that too. So what was kind of the thing that popped for you when I mentioned that to you, when I first thought it might be a great topic for us?
Well, what came to mind is exactly what you were just explaining, is the perception from some people that, oh, she still believes in the Catholic Church, she still believes in, and to tell you the truth, that was the base of the beginning for me. My parents are Catholic, they grew up Catholic, that's all they knew. Therefore, they raised their children Catholic. I was baptized. I went to church at a young age. I learned my prayers, and it stuck with me. At 16, we do the profession de foi, profession of faith, where the church sort of sees us as an adult in their eyes that will take responsibility to come to church on our own and without having our parents push us to go to church every Sunday. And I made a decision, and I talked to my parents about it, that, you know what, the church is not what's important for me. Well, I love ceremony. I've always loved ceremony. I was that kid that took stuff out of the cupboards and had my little altar, and I was always doing ceremony for whatever reason, with my siblings, with friends. So that's what stayed with me more in the church than the scripture, than the dogma of it and stuff. And dogma, I was looking online about dogma. What the definition of dogma is a principle or set of principles laid down by an authority as incontrovertibly true. So,
And I think maybe that's a great place to sort of come from, because a set of authority or a set of rules or teachings laid down by somebody, and I think that's what people have the problem with, is somebody else telling them how they should believe, or somebody else maybe having limiting beliefs, trying to impose those beliefs onto people. Because myself, like I mentioned last week as well, I don't have one specific religious background. I mean, my mother was Buddhist, my father is Catholic on his side, my grandmother on my mom's side, very Catholic, died Catholic, Oh, sorry, we froze there. Are you still there? Okay.
I'm still here.
So she was raised Catholic, buried in a Catholic cemetery. Her rosary is still in the family. It's one of those special things. But I think for me, what I always got is I had the same thing for you. I love the religious ceremony of the church. I love the beauty of the church. And in and of itself, Christianity is a beautiful religion. I have many Christian pieces around my house, many bits of Christian iconography. But as one solid set practice, it didn't resonate with me. But what I always found is a little bit sad. And again, it's not to sort of be like, oh, this is better, or this is worse. I find now that even if you mention Christianity in certain circles or you bring it up, it is almost considered lesser, or it's considered like, oh, you don't quite get it. You still have this one, set belief. And for me, I don't necessarily see it as a set belief, as that practice happens to resonate with your soul. So it works for it. Because you and I hang out with very similar people all the time. And we know very, very open-minded Christians. I know people that their solid practice is a Christian base. They come from a Christian faith. Too early on
Tongue
Sunday.
twister.
Faith base. They're very religious when it comes to Christianity. And very, very open-minded. And again, I think it applies to any religion, because again, you see nowadays going on with the things with the Islamic extremists. Where people, unfortunately after 9/11, a lot of people went into that fear-based pattern that everybody who practices Islam is, this and there's very, very many open-minded Islamic people as well. I think you're going to find an extremist in any tradition who's going to try force your beliefs and practices. And one of the things for a lot of people, and some people don't actually like to necessarily hear this, if somebody's following a practice that you might not necessarily agree with, maybe it's because they agree with the practice. Because
Exactly.
Everybody goes, oh, the religion has done this. I go, or maybe the person just likes using that aspect of the religion as a way to get across what they want to believe or they want to do. But it's not necessarily the religious aspect. They may already have that belief. I think a great example would be homosexuality, how it's viewed very, very differently throughout so many countries and so many religions. And there are Christian traditions that are very, very open to homosexuality, loving, accepting, we're all God's children, as it were, and other ones that are specifically very against it. This is not a practice, not a belief, not a philosophy that they condone or endorse. And I think, too, what people don't understand is whether or not you had that religious belief, you would probably already come to that understanding just in a different way. It's just, and I find for me, and I always say this to people, that it's a pity that people use God as the excuse to not like. And because of that, unfortunately, and it's been done so many times, and so many wars, have been fought in the name of God, things like that, God has become a bad word, in many circles for many people. And what is your take on that? Because like I say, even from when I've known you, even though, like I said, I met you with the drum circles and you had your shaman base, you have never hidden your Christian background, like your Catholic base. You've always had the Marys in there. I think you were already teaching the journeying with the two Marys. Is it the course you teach?
Yeah,
I think you were already doing that.
I started with the Journeying with Mary Magdalene. And I'll just plug in that,
Yes.
Rowan Moon and I, one of my colleagues, are doing the Red Cloak Collectives, which is
Yes.
a 13 months, 13 moons. Once a month, we meet once a month to discuss the Gospels of Mary Magdalene. Non-denominational, it has nothing to do with religion. It has to do with her teachings.
Perfect. So that's, so that's Red Cloak for anybody that never heard.
Yeah,
and they can find out about that on your Facebook, can they?
Yeah, on my Facebook, on my Instagram. Right now, for the month, we start November 1st. Our first session is full. We have 10 participants, plus Rowan Moon and I, where we'll go to one gospel and we'll guide the people to journey with Mary Magdalene to get a view, a perspective from her directly. Perfect. In a direct revelation. Like a shamanic journey. Mm-hmm. And so that's what we're going to do once a month. And people don't have to do the 13 months. They come and join us in December, or they can come and join us in February or April, whatever. But that's something that we've started. So for me, Mary Magdalene was a compassionate ally that came to me at a time when I was really hitting rock bottom,
Mm-hmm.
and her and I sort of developed this course that I taught for many years. So now it's sort of morphed into something
Mm-hmm.
different, but we're still bringing her teachings to people that are
Mm-hmm.
interested in learning about her. We'll just move back into what we were talking
Oh,
about.
yes. Yeah.
Uh, I also found, because the word spirituality is thrown around a lot also,
Yes. Yeah.
and the definition of spirituality is the quality of being concerned with the human spirit or soul as opposed to material or physical things. So that's one definition that I
Mm-hmm.
found. And so, I mean, there's tons of other, definitions. What is
Yeah.
spiritual spirituality? The concepts of spirit and soul often overlap, and both are believed to survive bodily death in some religions. And spirit can also have the sense of ghost, example, a manifestation of the spirit of a deceased person. Spirit is also often used to refer to the consciousness or personality.
Mm-hmm.
That's different.
And I think that's maybe a great way to put it, because for me, when I say spirituality, when I'm referring to spirituality, I am referring to my soul's journey. And I think that that's a good thing, the concept of the soul, the focus on the soul. However, when I'm speaking of that divine source, I'm speaking of God or divinity or universe or all that is. And I find for me that even though in my belief everything is all encompassing and everything comes together, there still for me in my journey is a comfort of knowing when I'm struggling through something that I can pray to God. Or, if I'm in a struggle, that there is that source that I can turn to. Because I do notice when it comes to spirituality, where it is a lot of self focus, sometimes people can almost lose that connection because they're so focused on trying to heal themselves or figure out the answers or sort out everything, to the degree where they forget that they do have that conscious connection with the universe. They just might not be applying it because of fear-based belief patterns.
Yes, I agree 100%. And each individual person, will tap into what resonates. And we talked about resonance last week.
Hmm.
And it is about resonating. What resonates with you? And for me, really, as long as it's not going to injure somebody else,
Hmm.
mentally,
Yeah.
physically, spiritually, go on your path. Tap into what resonates with you, what makes your heart sing, what makes your soul
Hmm.
dance. It's really important. This journey that we're on is an individual journey. It
Yeah.
is a lonesome journey.
It's
It's
your spirituality. Yeah.
Yes, right. So tap into there's so many different ways to tap into what your soul requires in your life, that it's endless. It's
Hmm.
limitless,
Hmm.
you know.
Hmm.
So,
No, I 100% agree. And I think, too, one of the things for me that I find, I'll work on my spiritual practice. And as we mentioned last week, spirituality doesn't exempt you from life. It gives you the tools to better ride the ups and downs. And I think that's a lot. And we'll go into this in other episodes, sort of about manifesting, belief, drawing things to you. And I think a lot of people assume that when you're on your spiritual path or you've aligned yourself correctly, that there should be no struggle in your life. There should be no strife. There should be no issues. And I always explain to people, you're still going to have an earth life. It's just the way you react to it might be differently. And I know for everybody, like for anybody who follows my page, I've had some health issues recently. And as much as I believe in spirit and connecting to the universe, for anybody who wasn't aware, I had toxic mold poisoning. So I got really sick. When I went to the emergency room, I still went into that fear-based belief of what's happening. And I still went back to that practice. And when I went for a chest x-ray, I found a rosary that I'd stuck in my bag inadvertently when I was moving from the old house to my new house now. And when I found that piece in there, it kind of gave me that comfort. I was like, okay, like I'm being watched over, And I think people forget sometimes that no matter what you believe, there is still that comfort that there's that bigger source that is there also guarding you. That sometimes we have to go too big for me. I don't get it. I need your help. And I mean, you and I have discussed that many times because as we mentioned, Blue and I have been friends for years now, and I mean, we're best friends with each other, so we do know a lot of the other's background. And I mean, both you and I, since we've known each other, have been through very heavy things where it would be your moment where you lean on God, or you really try put that faith practice back into being.
Yeah, exactly. I've lost both my parents in the last 3 years, and both had suffered for many. My dad had suffered
Hmm.
for many years, and I did. When he was passing, I sat there beside him and I prayed to God to come and get him, to
Hmm.
relieve him from his suffering.
Hmm.
And I prayed to the Virgin Mother, and the same with my mom. I when she was dying, she wanted to be with Dad,
Hmm.
and I prayed to God. I said, God, make that connection for them because she
Hmm.
really wants to be with him, and it brought a sense of peace for me. And
Yes.
I mean, I was sad because I was going to miss them
Hmm.
physically,
Yeah.
but their spirit lives on within me and my
Yes.
siblings and their siblings. I see my
Yeah.
parents
Yeah.
everywhere, right? So that comforts me. That gives me a sense of
Hmm.
comfort. So
And I think too, you also get that moment where, and again, as you mentioned, each person's practice is separate. Sorry, I'm trying to consciously be slower this week. Some people mentioned I forgot that we were doing a video last week and I went to my talking speed. And for anyone who knows me, knows I'll tell you an hour-long story in 20 minutes when I'm talking. So I'm trying to go slower today, Paleki. But yeah, sorry. So with that practice, like with the thing, with your parents, where they're everywhere, what we're trying to say is, in no means are we trying to say you have to have this belief or this belief or this practice or this practice. And I think that's where you can kind of tell the difference. And I mean, like I said, I know beautiful Buddhists, beautiful Christians. I also know Christians that have very limiting belief patterns, Buddhists that have, and it works for them. That's where they want to work within their journey. And that works. And maybe for me, some of my patterns could be considered limiting to somebody else who has a different practice, or a different belief system. And I think you hit the nail on the head where you said, as long as it doesn't hurt anybody or demean anybody. And I think the problem is, unfortunately, over, especially in the West. I mean, we haven't been great with that with Christianity, where we have used a religion and the name of God in order to suppress people, keep people down, or make people follow. And I mean, perfect example is we are in New Brunswick, Canada, and we're on the Woolastook, so the St. John River, for those that wouldn't know the Maliseet word for it. And in those times when, I mean, a lot of it came through, unfortunately, if you have followed the history, and Louise would probably have more knowledge on this because she's doing a course on First Nations and the history of the First Nations people in Canada. And I mean, unfortunately, a lot of people were taken away from their traditional beliefs, practices, languages, and forced to convert to Christianity. They had to become Christian because it was considered the proper thing to do. And I mean, unfortunately, it's not just with the First Nations in Canada, it's many, many, many countries, around the world, many continents around the world, where the people are only now coming back to the traditional practices. I mean, Hawaii, another perfect example where the traditional Hawaiian traditions are coming back in, the First Nations one, both North America and South America, Aborigine in Australia, the Maori in New Zealand. There's so many that are reclaiming their practices, but the reason I'm bringing this up is they're reclaiming their version of God. They still have God. It's just their version. And I almost kind of, wish we could get to a place where the word God becomes synonymous with that source, not specifically Christianity.
right, right. I agree.
Like,
I agree. It's yeah. Well, I mean, it's been going for millennial, right? I mean,
that's it.
the word God has been, like you said, taken, for in regards to wars and in the name of God, we,
Hmm. Hmm.
do this and yeah, we need to reclaim the positive, unconditional, loving
Yes.
spirit that is God.
And that's what I see when I look into Christianity. I see the teachings of Jesus. When you're looking, and again, I'm not trying to discredit anybody's beliefs. If you're a Christian listening to this, welcome to the podcast as well. But for me, even when I see aspects in the Bible or any teachings where God is vengeful and God is exacting, a judgment, and God is punishing people, that to me is not my version of God.
No.
My connection to the universe that I have, I go, God would never do that. I don't see why God would do that, because we're humans here to learn. God would understand that we have limited knowledge so that we can experience our earth lessons.
Right.
So it's almost kind of like punishing a child for not knowing any better, but then being mad that they don't know any better when you created that child to not know any better.
Well, you're talking about child. When I was young, we learned at a very young age
Hmm.
about confession, to go to
Yep. Yes.
confession, to try. And I remember, I remember telling my mom, I said, "What do I confess? Like, what did I do that was so bad that I have to
Yeah.
confess to God? I can talk to God directly and tell him that
Hmm.
I've been naughty or I've done,
Yeah.
something, I hit my brother or whatever." So when the time would come, I would kneel there, and this, the little door goes,
Hmm.
slides open, and I'd say, well, I hit my brother, and I wasn't very nice to my sister, and I would go on like this,
Hmm. Yeah.
which I was lying. I was confessing,
Yeah.
but I was lying.
Which in and of itself, sin in the church. Maybe you should have been confessing that.
Father, I have sinned. I'm
Right.
lying right now.
Right. You're gonna have to
Yeah.
go back and do a lot of makeup confessions. Ooh, for the first 16 years, buddy. Not that
Mm.
real.
So, so I always would explain that to my friends, even my friends as a teenager, I would say, I talk to God directly. I
Yeah.
talk to God directly. If I'm angry at my parents because they didn't give me permission to go to a dance at the high school or whatever, I go walk in the potato fields behind our house,
Yeah.
and I'd scream at God. I'm like, why, God?
Yeah.
Why? Why are my parents so mean to me?
Yeah.
Instead of being nasty to them and speaking back to them, which they
Yeah.
did not like, I would share it with God. And then
Yeah.
I'd come back and I'd be, I'm good,
But I think that's good though, because you remembered that you had that connection. And I think a lot of people forget that, because in a lot of cases, again, unfortunately, with Christianity, there are a lot of times where it's made out that the priest is the only one who's able to make the connection. And I mean, you and I have discussed this before, because again, for anybody who didn't tune in last week, myself, I'm a spiritual reader. So I communicate with people's family and friends that have passed, and Lou's a spiritual practitioner where she does shamanism, Reiki, energy healing. So there are people that have been to me over the years. I don't know if you've had this, where they've been apprehensive because they've lost a child or they've lost somebody, gone to the church and mentioned to the priest that they're coming. And the priest is like, that's evil. It's the work of the devil. It's this. And, because the Bible, there's certain sections that says, don't go to fortune tellers,
yes.
as it is, and that's fine. Again, one interpretation of depending how it is. But myself, I would more look at that one as maybe like, don't rely on fortune tellers or don't rely on readings, rather than your own trusting your intuition or your connection to the universe,
Yeah.
because for me, the way I explained it to that person, and it made sense for them when they came, is I said, but if you believe heaven is real, and if you believe that your son is safe, why would God not want you to know that by letting your son talk to you again?
Right.
Because that was always my philosophy behind it. Why would God be that cruel that it's like, nope, nobody else is able to ever talk to your son again. You're never going to be able to speak to them again. And again, for me, that loving energy, I go, no, I think that divine source, God as it is, would put people down here that maybe do have that odd in between where we are able to, pick up on things differently. And I mean, as I mentioned myself, my focus is not Reiki. So if I need energy work, I'm going to go to Lou. If I want a shamanic practice, I'm going to go with Lou, kind of thing. Whereas if somebody wants a medium reading, I go with me. If somebody, we have a great friend, she works with horses, she does horse healing. Like, I'm never going to go, oh, I'm specialized in horse healing. You go to that person. But I think in and of their own way, God is smart enough to know that there are so many different beliefs and people down here that source. And when I say source, because I don't view God, when I say the word God, I mean male and female. I don't mean just
Yeah.
boy God kind of thing. So
Right.
my version of God is that universe rather than just saying goddess as well. But I believe that God would go, here, you go to this healer because it works for you. It's going to help you with your healing. You go to this one. Because I think anything where you are getting your connection back to the universe is God reaching out to you just in a different way. Maybe if you're not comfortable sitting in a pew in a church,
Yeah.
and maybe you do. Like in this case, the person went and prayed all the time, went to the Sunday service, but also wanted to speak directly to her son, which she was able to do through a reading, which she felt she never got that sort of closure at the church for herself.
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, there's no reason. I mean, there's so many people on this planet that are suffering and they're
Mm-hmm.
grasping. But again, we have sovereignty. We have
Yes.
full responsibility for our well-being.
Yeah.
And if you decide not to do that, who are we to judge?
Yes.
That's the
Yeah.
path
And
that's
that's it. Like
individual.
for some people, they're never going to agree with readings. It's just never going to be their thing. For some people, going to a church is going to be their thing. And that's what we're trying to say is I don't think any one of those practices is wrong. Do you know? I think like if that's where you get your connection and you find your peace, amazing. If you need a reading and it brings you your peace, if you need an energy healing and it brings you your peace. For some people talking to God, they go in nature.
Yeah.
Some people, for me, that's where I've had some of my most profound connections to God is going and sitting by the water, connecting myself by the ocean, getting myself out with the trees. That's where I get some of my most profound connections. But I can also get a really great link to God sitting on my couch in my living room.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. I mean, well, I just lost that's the French in me, well, uh,
Yeah.
I we have our own relationship with God.
Yes.
It's an individual thing. And I'm not saying that I don't enjoy going to a good mass, like a good
Hmm.
Easter or Christmas mass and listening to the songs and it just brings me back to a time of tranquility and
Hmm.
yeah, a sense of community also because in churches, whatever your religious background is, there's a sense of community.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everybody in the community and things like that. But I remember my mom saying this. I'll just share this little
Hmm.
story. I said, Mom, why do we sit like in the first 3-4 pews of the church, like right in front? And she said, because she said the people that sit in the back, that was her perception, are the snoopers. They want to know who walks in and what they're wearing
Yeah.
and what they're the gossipers, and I'm like,
Oh, yeah, yeah,
wow,
yeah, yeah.
okay. And
Yeah.
so she said, we don't need that energy. We go and sit in the front so we
Yeah.
can listen. So even her, like she tapped into the energy of the people that sat in the
Yes.
back.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
And
Yeah.
I thought, oh my gosh. Afterwards, as I grew older, and I'm like, yes, because I would go, consistently with my mom and stuff, and it was always the same people.
Yes. Now, we should specify that is for their church, not
Yes,
necessarily every church. So if you
all
sit
the
in the
church.
church in the back, we're not calling you a gossip. But if you notice what everybody's wearing, honey, you may want to pay attention.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Anyway,
But they're a
yes.
perfect example, and I mean, I know because you said too, you told me that wonderful story when you guys were traveling through the States, I believe it was. You were
Oh
going,
yes, yes. We're going
and
to Florida. Yeah,
yeah,
we're going
if you want
to
to share
Florida.
that one with people.
Yeah, we went to Florida and I was 16 at the time, but my mom said wherever we're going to stop, we're going to a church. Whatever church is open, that's
Yeah.
where we're going. So I thought, oh, that's interesting. So we got to Georgia and we stopped at this, I think it was a Baptist church because there was a lot of singing and a lot
Oh, yeah,
of
yeah, yeah,
hallelujah
yeah, yeah.
and things like that. And I think we were like the only white people there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The Caucasian family.
And but it was amazing. I
Yeah.
could feel the spirit. I mean,
And
at
that,
16,
yes.
I felt the
Yeah.
spirit because it was this all-encompassing, the energy of everybody that was in that
Hmm.
church. You
Hmm.
just felt it. I felt it in my heart, and I got very emotional.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved it. I really, really loved it. But my mom was adamant that we'd go to church every Sunday, no matter what church it was.
Mm-hmm.
It was important for us be thankful, to pray to
Yeah.
God and say thank you
Yeah.
for travels and thank you for keeping us safe and
Mm-hmm.
all that stuff. So
And I
yeah,
mean, for some people, that is their connection. Going to church every Sunday is important, kind of thing. And I always joke with people myself. I'm not specifically a Christian, and I haven't gone to church in many, many, many years now because it's just not my practice. It doesn't work for me. But I have a church directly across the street from where I'm living now, and I love seeing it every time I go outside. It makes me happy because I go, oh, there. My joke with people is always like, if there's ever a zombie apocalypse or a vampire chases you onto, you can get away into consecrated ground and you're good. But but the reality is, I do love that there's that sense of community as well, like you were saying. But for me, I'm just always thinking like how many prayers have been prayed in that space.
mm,
Like how many blessings have been there, kind of thing. And people forget this thing, and then maybe we should keep a watch on our time here because
yeah,
Lou and I can get chatting, so we
yes.
have to hold each other accountable. Or we literally will talk for a good 3 hours and go, oh, shoot, podcast, turn it off. So we're trying to make it as good as we can for you guys so you don't get too bored sitting.
Mm,
But that one to me, I always love that aspect. And I mean, some of my favorite spirituality books to read were, the books on miracles that people had. If somebody, something came out, they did a prayer and this miracle showed up, or their connections to angels, or, things like that. Those are always my favorite ones because it's this beautiful thing about God and, you're linked to God and God stepping in and helping you, kind of thing. And again, I know for some people that's tricky because then they go, well, I've been through stuff. Why didn't I get a miracle? It's not about like, God picks you over you. It's just for me, I think when you start looking again for the miracles or you start looking again for the blessings from the universe, they're definitely there. It's just we forget that and we can get lost in it easily when we're in our despair. When we're
yes.
in our anger, when we're in our moment. And so, for me, that's why, and it's quite fitting we're discussing this because we're late filming it this week. We're actually filming it Sunday morning, which traditionally Christian
Yeah,
church, so it
yeah.
is fitting that we're discussing this
Yeah,
one
I'd
this
be I'd
morning.
be in church. I'd be in church right now. It would be like almost
Yeah.
finishing.
But there, perfect example because, I think, and this is like, again, not everybody necessarily needs this, where Lou and I do this as our careers. We're both very fortunate that we have sacred spots for ourselves. We can set up altars, we can set up, in Lou's case, you can see behind her the beautiful sort of sacred art and everything that's in Lou's healing room. She's got a special healing space, so not everybody needs that. But for me, those sacred spaces or my sacred space, where I connect, that's my church. For lack of a better word, that's my place where I go and talk to my version of God. It's just I happen to have a whole bunch of different things from different ways to find God or different ways people have seen or interpreted God. And I
Right.
mean, that's all different religions are. It's just different interpretations of
Yeah.
your feeling of that divine aspect.
Yeah. I had that conversation with a lady years ago in the middle of Chapters, our bookstore,
Mm-hmm.
and I think she grew up Baptist, and we were discussing a certain situation that had happened in the community, and at the end, I sort of looked at her and I said, we're speaking the same
Yeah.
thing, right? But in a different language.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she looked at me. She said, "Yes, I've sensed that." She said,
Yeah.
I was finally listening to you instead of, oh, what's my response
Yes. Your
to this?"
response. What does your reaction have to be? Yeah.
Yeah. So that was, yeah. She's an amazing woman, and I always liked the conversations with her. Our next door neighbor, when we first moved here 28 years ago, staunch Baptist,
Mm-hmm.
didn't play cards on Sunday or something like that, and but she, oh my gosh, she was the sweetest woman and so strong-willed, and
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
love that. I love people who have a
But
strong
for
will.
some people it does work. For some
Yeah,
people having a strict practice. I mean, if you look at any tradition, like Buddhism, even if you're going to be a monk or a nun, it's a very rigid, very specific practice. You're doing your set prayers, you're doing the set meditation time, you're doing so. Any religion would have that, and if that works for you, it's great. But for me, and I don't want to be degrading in this because I don't want to be like people don't have fun. I like fun too much in order to have a very set practice. I love my music. And this was another topic we were going to do next week about, spirituality and what you're supposed to eat or what you're supposed to look like or how you're supposed to act or what you're supposed to say, and how a lot of people, again, that fear pattern, that perception, if I do something wrong, I'll offend God or I don't connect to the universe in the right way.
Yeah.
So
we can sort of wrap up on that note, because you sort of stated what we're going to talk about next week.
Perfect. Yes. Okay. Well, if you have stuck with us till the very, very end, thank you so much. We appreciate it. If not, I'm looking for you. But no. But yes, thank you so much for tuning in for this week. And as I mentioned, or as we mentioned too, we are going to be doing this as a weekly podcast. You can find us on Facebook. My Facebook pages are Angel Messages by Paleki. My Instagram is spiritual.medium.paleki. YouTube, where we're uploading the videos, is under Spiritual Medium Paleki on that page, my channel there. And on the podcast, it is P-Lou or P-Lou. And it should be a couple of weeks before we're on every major platform. But if you want the audio version now, go on to Podbean. So Podbean, and you can find us under there on P-Lou. And Lou, your pages again, just for anybody if they want to look you up.
On Facebook, I'm under Your Healing Journey with Louise Lang Farr. I'm thinking about my art one.
Yeah, you're going to get a whole bunch of people like, I can't find your page.
Your Healing Journey with Louise Lang, Lang Farr. Acronym for ARR. And then on Instagram, I started a new page. It's called Journeying with Louise Lang Farr.
Perfect. And for anybody watching this on YouTube, the links are going to be right below the video to everything, photo credits, all that stuff, all below the video. So do check that out. And thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in with us again this week. And we hope to see you next week. And thank you for watching P-Lou.
Yes. Thanks, P.
Bye. Love you, Lou.
Everybody. Bye.
Love you, everybody. Bye.